So we're going to take a few moments and really just focus in on Adobe Illustrator. When I first started doing web design, I had no clue about Illustrator and I spent all my time using Photoshop. But over time, I would have to do logo files that were vector-based, and I honestly didn't even know what a vector file was. And so a vector file is a file that can be expanded infinitely because of the way that it's designed, and you could put it on billboards and it doesn't lose its resolution. So that's why Illustrator is great for multiple reasons, but that's one of the reasons why I use it as a web designer and as somebody who's doing any type of branding. A lot of times a client or a printer, they'll be requesting vector files and I'll be like, oh, I didn't do your logo in Illustrator, I did it in Photoshop. So then I'd have to go into Illustrator and figure it out. So let's go ahead and open up Adobe Illustrator and we'll go File, New, and then Create. So we have our simple artboard here and we have this control panel, this little toolbox that's over here to the side. And whenever I'm creating a logo, normally I start with the typography and whatever the fonts that I'm going to use for it. So let's just start using Golden Gorilla as well. And I'll come in here and I for that logo I used Molot font. And then I can just click on this plus sign and get me a nice little deal here. Now when I downloaded this Gorilla, it came in a vector format. My Gorilla logo is right here. And this .ai format would work. This EPS format would also work, but I'm just going to use the Illustrator file, which is this .ai, and I'm just going to drag it in here into onto here like this. Okay. So as I'm playing with that, it looks like it dragged that in there and rasterized it and turned it into an actual picture. And we need it to be in the Illustrator format, so I'm going to delete it. I'm going to go back in here to this, and I'm just going to open it up directly. It's saying that there's some missing fonts, so I can just close that. You'll notice that we don't need this font anyway. We just wanted the Gorilla. So I'm just going to copy him. I'm going to pop him over here. So here we go. Something that is interesting about Illustrator is the way that they use rulers and different things. To me, I'm like, this is so different than Photoshop, and it took me forever to figure it out. But when I go to View, and then I go to Rulers, and I say Show Rulers, it has these rulers up here, the top and the bottom. I'm like, well, that's great, but how does that help me? If you go over here and you click on the ruler now and just hold down your arrow, and you've got to be on this little arrow right here. You click on that, and you just drag this over. See how it's dragging a line? It drags a guide out there for you. I was like, oh. Forever, I didn't know how to get these guides out here, and I had to go through a number of tutorials that I've watched over the years to figure some of these things out, but that's one of the ones that I really like because now then I can make sure that my Gorilla is centered. Once again, you can select both of these and then go up here and choose this horizontal align center, and it will align that so things are looking really good and aligned. And as you can see, I've got this Golden Gorilla here. I can take it and do Command C, and then I can go Edit and Paste in Place. The reason I do that is I want it to be in the exact location. If I just did Command V, it's just gonna paste that Gorilla arbitrarily someplace else, and I want it to be right on top so that I can just click on Shift and then down arrow, and it just moves stuff down right below. And it's still in the same alignment as the other items. And now then I can choose and to type bakery here. And then I can choose to center it. And once again, if you click here, I can see where my centering needs to go. Okay. And then if you want, you can let me do that. You have to hold down the Shift key. It's interesting, in Photoshop and the latest edition, you no longer have to hold down the Shift key to drag and keep the aspect ratio. But you'll notice as I'm dragging here, the aspect ratio gets, does whatever you tell it to do. If I hold down the Shift key, let me do a Command Z to undo that. If I hold down the Shift key and drag, then no matter what I do with my mouse, it keeps the aspect ratio correct. It doesn't stretch the letters out. It doesn't make them too tall. It doesn't make them too wide. And so what I want to do is I want to drag that to be like this. So basically all I'm doing here right now is creating a vertical logo. And you'll notice there's a little bit of space between my line right there and that B. And so I'll just kind of bump that out a little extra so that it's in line with the G at the top. Sometimes I will grab another guide and put it here so that I know that everything's aligned and touching, and the same with the other end as well. I used to think that I was really good at eyeballing things, and then I started using these guides and I was like, wow, I was actually really off on that. So now I like to be precise, and I can drag these things out, make them precise, and get it like that. Looks really good. So here you are, you're using Illustrator. You've probably seen different things where people have made, typography, have curves and different things like that. And that's pretty easy to do. If you click on this bakery, you're in here, you're selected with this selection tool. I can go over here to this warp option, and I can just do this and tell it make with warp. And so I click on that. You'll notice that it immediately started to make this warp out a little bit. And so if I wanted to, I could take that and put this, actually it would be better if I warped it the other direction, kind of down. And there's a lot of options here. I can tell it to arc like that, I can do it like that. I can invert that out to be like this. So I kind of like it like that, so it kind of looks like it's bending with the gorilla's weight on it. And then say that I was to move this up here and move this down. Then I can go in here and warp this, and I can tell it, well, I want it to arc like that. And you've probably seen where people have done logos real simply like this, like that. That's nice, simple, just some simple warping tools, great. I'm like, you know what? I don't like any of that, so I just do Command Z. I'm gonna undo all of that. Puts it back to where it was. It's great. Now then, I might want to just put this in some type of a cool shape or box. So I have this simple black box here, and it's full of, it's got color. I don't really need it to have color in there. So I'm gonna go to this drop down up here, and this little red X is gonna tell it that I don't want any fill. So now I've got my box here, and I do want it to have a line though. So the stroke, I'm gonna take it and make it pretty thick like that. And then I'm going to keep it black like that. Make sure everything's nice and centered. I'm like, yeah, it looks good. It's a nice little simple, but I wanted to add some stylized thing. This is something that wasn't always there, or if it was, I didn't know about it for a long time. So I didn't really know how to use Illustrator all that well. And so oftentimes I was doing things a really hard, long way to make things happen. But this tool, you click on it, you can go in here and click on the center point, and you can just drag stuff up and make this nice little curved look to it. And so when you have this and you can add these curves, you can make stuff look pretty cool pretty quickly. If you click on something, by default, it has this tool creates a curve, but if you double click, it creates a point. And so you can very quickly create, something like that. Or if you curve the top, you do like that. And then by dropping this down a little bit, I could go command, let's do edit, redo move. I can go edit, copy, edit, paste in place, drag this down, and you can see that I'm starting to get like a cool, kind of almost like a badge or something that I put on a uniform, kind of look and feel to that. And so you can play with different ways of using that and utilizing that tool. I love it because there are times, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to actually delete this one. There are times that I have a shape or an image that I actually want to make my own. And so I have this gorilla here, and I can click on it, and I see all these points, and I can zoom in, and I'm like, well, I really would like his head to be, a little bit rounder here. And so I immediately got more of a forehead point, and that changes that up. And then I can go in here, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, well, let's bring this hair down a little bit more. And let's change this out just a little bit here. Do that. So I start to customize him just ever so slightly, doing different things, just playing with that there, seeing what I like, what I don't like. There are times whenever I start down the road, I'm like, okay, that looks really horrible. Other times I do something, I'm like, that looks really amazing. But as you can see, just by using this tool, I've really already started to make him look like a totally different gorilla. And change up his mouth. Go in here. Change this up a little bit. So not a ton of difference, but a little bit. He almost looks like a gorilla that was merged with a bear. And so now I've kind of created a more customized gorilla that doesn't look exactly like the clip art or the stock art that I purchased. And so modified it a little bit, make it a little more my own. But as you can see, we didn't even change up a whole lot. So that's just one way to use that tool. It's one of my favorite tools to use. I'm actually going to show you how. I'm going to move this gorilla up out of the way a little bit. Sometimes I want to make a font or typography my own as well. And the way that you do that is if you're in here, once again, all this is still vector art. I will click on this, Golden Gorilla Bakery, and I'm just going to start with Golden Gorilla. And I'm going to go to Type, and I'm going to say to create outlines. So once again, this is one of my favorite tools. This is just a quick tutorial, but we've already used this little curvature tool. Now we're going to use it as well on this Golden Gorilla. We've created outlines, and what that does is this is now no longer text. These letters have now been turned into objects or shapes that we can modify and distort however we want. And so if I want to now, I can go in here and click on an individual letter G, and I can extend that up, and I can make that bigger. Sometimes I like to go in here and I create this warp. I love this warp tool, and it'll allow me to stretch things out and to change that shape. And so you can see how making something very unique can be done really quickly with just a few clicks here and there and just the knowledge of a few tools. So I'm just going in here and kind of distorting this, creating a little bit more of a, a little bit more of a design, so it's not just your typical font, something that's different, something that stands out. And that's what I love about my job, is that I love that I can come in here and basically just get creative and play. So once again, this warp tool, I love it because you can just, change the shape of stuff really quickly, warp things out, be like, okay, here we go. So whenever I'm creating something that's going to fit inside of a shape, oftentimes this is how I do it. There's other ways that you can do it. there's a lot of different ways that you can create shapes with words and typography, but a quick and dirty way is to just do it this way, is to turn these things into outlines. Another thing is when you're creating logos for a customer, once you've finished your font, you might want to tell the customer what the font style was, whether it's Myriad Pro or Molot or whatever it is. But when you send them the artwork, I usually do a Command A on the fonts, and then I do type and then create outlines so that everything has been turned into a shape. Otherwise, when you send your Illustrator files to the customer, if they don't have that font on their computer, it's not going to show up. It's going to turn out the way that that logo did on this one. It's going to look like that when it should have looked like this font here. Because they sent that to us, that gorilla right there to us, and that font right there is still part of the file. We don't have that font on our computer, or I don't have that font on my computer. Then whenever I open it up, then it looks like this. And it's like, oh, that's a totally different font. Now, I look up here and it tells me that the font is Great Lakes NF. So I can select that. I think it lets me click it and type it. I want to select it. And then I can open up Illustrator. I can open up Firefox or just a browser. And I can type download great. I can actually. And so there's this Great Lakes font free by Nix Fonts on Font Squirrel. And there it is. So I can just download that font. I click Save File. Comes down in this nice zip file. I open it up. Great Lakes. Now, if you're on a Mac and you want to install just a single font like this, you can just double click it. It's going to open up your font book. And you can just click Install Font. There it is. Now then, when I go back to Illustrator, see how it changed that immediately to the new font? You're good to go. The silverback font was in Enter Sandsman Bold. So we could do the same thing. Sometimes a certain font family will have an italicized font, a bold font, a light font, and there might be 16, 24 different styles within that one font family. Used to, I would go through and I was clicking them one at a time and installing them one at a time. I had no clue that I could either go to File, New Collection, or click Add Fonts, and then go to a font folder like this one, Robolt. It has all these. Look at how many there are. It's all part of Robolt. Well, if I click on this first one and I scroll to the end and I hit Shift, I can click Open and it will add all those fonts at the same time. Before I knew how to do that, I would just go through and spend all this time. And there are times whenever I'm designing something that I might download 10 to 15 font families just to try them out. A bunch of script fonts. If I'm doing a 4th of July brochure, I might use 2 or 3 different fonts, and that can really take up a lot of time. Something else that's important to note is that installing bad fonts can actually corrupt your machine. Like if you install a font, then it says, there was an error found, and it'll tell you if the problem was minor or if it was major. If it says there's a major problem with that font, then don't download it. It's not a good idea. It can be very problematic for your machine. One of my favorite resources for fonts is Creative Market. So if I wanted to do alien font, I would just type that in, and it pulls up all these really cool fonts. And you'll notice that some of them are $10, some of them are $39. It's amazing what typography will do for your graphic design. So say that you just downloaded that, you might pay for one of these, but one of my favorite font tools, this is one of my secret sauces, you can Google a lot of these, but this one, I love it because it's got some great fonts. So you get to defont.com and you're needing to download some free fonts. What I love about using a tool like this, and you can do this on Creative Market as well, there's a little way to look at it, but on Creative Market, you're going to be paying for fonts, and that can get expensive quick. And so one of the things about this tutorial, this lesson that I'm creating is I wanted to give people tools that they could use that would save them money and be fast. So if I click on Medieval for the font that I want, I get these really cool fonts. And then right here, I have this preview. So I can type in Golden Gorilla Bakery right here and click submit. And as I'm previewing the fonts, I can see what they look like before I ever download them. That's really handy, saves you some time. I love these, old English looking fonts right now, medieval. But then I'm like, you know what? Let me look at the handwritten ones. Same thing, my Golden Gorilla Bakery still stays there. I'm looking at all this scripty stuff. I kind of like this one here. I don't know how to pronounce that. It looks like Chrysanti. Here's a nice one, this Amsterdam. So I download that font. It says, do I want to allow that? Yes, I do. There it is. I can click on it. I can click install. And now I've got a font installed. So that's just a quick, easy way to install fonts. Once I install that font, I can go up here to type in the font, and it's already there. See, it says Amsterdam. Now, I'm looking at this font down here, and it's really light. And I'm going to stretch it out so that we can see it a little bit better, and I'm going to zoom in on it. You'll notice that it has a lot of spacing in here. One of the ways that you can really stylize fonts is by going into the character tool. And I'm noticing right now over here, this is like the properties tab, and it's going to have a lot of the different things that we use quite often in designing different things. But if you ever don't see, this is what, I can't remember, it's leading and kerning are the things that are the spaces in between fonts, but I can't ever remember which one is which. But this little drop down right here is going to take our fonts further and closer together. So I want that to be a lot closer together. So I'm going to put -100 in here. And then it looks like that is all in all caps. So if I typed in Silverback, notice now that this font was really designed to not be in all caps. So if I go back here, I can put this back to 0, the normal size for this font. And then you can see that it's much better. And then I can click on my selection tool. I can make it bigger. And now it says Silverback, and it's, I wanted to do that. And then if I wanted to, I could just make that a different color by just clicking on that, adding it silver. And now then, even that looks pretty cool right now on this page. So that's just a quick way to add a font. You can use that in Illustrator. You can use this font now in Photoshop. It's going to be in all your tools, even Microsoft Word, all of them. So going back here to this Golden Gorilla Bakery, we've played with the text. We've played with individual tools. This one right here is the free transform tool. Love that. This is the curvature tool. Those are two of my most favorite tools in Photoshop. Now, let me double click off of that because I don't need that line to be there. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually tell this gorilla to not have any fill. Say no fill, and then I could just give it an outline. I'm going the wrong way on that. An outline. And then if I wanted to, I could actually, start warping these letters inside this golden gorilla so that it actually fits into this shape. And I could play with that between using this and my curvature tool. I could make, this golden gorilla fit in here. And it might take me a little bit more time. There's other ways to do this. There's some other tutorials. And what I'm going to do is I have 7 to 10 videos that I found on YouTube that I think are the best at figuring out how to use the Illustrator basics. And so I'll add them to a list within this tutorial, this lesson, to show you how that if you want to become super advanced with this, that's great. But today's lesson was really just to show you how to create outlines, which are very important, how to use these two tools, the curvature tool and this free transform tool. And the last thing that I want to show you is how you can take something and turn it into a vector, even when it's just a picture that you found online. So I can go here to Firefox, and I can go to Google, and I just type in state of Texas, and then I go to images, and I see that I can probably find a PNG pretty easily. I don't want one that is actual stock art, but I'm like, oh, I just need to, state of Texas really quickly. I can copy this image, I can put it into Illustrator. I'm gonna actually select all that and just move it out of the way. Put it in here, and then I go up here to image trace. If I drop this down, I've got multiple options. If I just click image trace, it's just gonna trace it, and I don't know what it's gonna do. But if I tell it that I want it to be, 6 colors, it's gonna trace it. And you'll notice I lose a little bit of definition. So notice that it went from that, when I do image trace, if I do 16 colors, it's gonna be a little bit sharper. If I click on this little button right here, I can go in here and I can increase the colors a little bit if I wanted to. But if I go down here to advanced and these paths, and I start moving that up, it's gonna give me back a little bit more of some of the depth and dimension that was there originally. So this doesn't always work great, but it will sometimes get you there pretty closely. And what I can do is, once this is done, then I click expand, and now it's turned this into a vector shape. So what was just a JPEG, so say you had a JPEG of an old logo that was, your great grandfather's business, and you wanted to turn it into something that you could blow up for him for who knows what, you could use this tool and this image trace to do that. And then once I have that, there was a white square around my Texas shape. I didn't want that there, so I just clicked on it and deleted it. So now all I have is this Texas shape. I can change the color if I want. And I can go back and use my curvature tool, and I can zoom in, and I notice that down here, this end of this Texas, it looks a little wompy jawed, so I'm just gonna pull that back out, and that looks a little more normal for Texas. And that looks good. And that's a pretty good Texas shape. Once again, if I wanted it to just be an outline, I can come in here and create an outline. And then I'm gonna tell it that I don't want any fill. And we've seen different things with shirts that have, the word home in them. I can come in here, I can go type, create outlines, and then I could go, stretch out this H if I wanted to, and fill it in here. And real quickly, just make my own home t-shirt logo, whatever I wanted to do. Now I know there is a business called the Home Tee, and they probably have the trademark on this home t-shirt, so don't make this exact thing, get creative, make your own. But this is what I would do if I was, playing with this. I could go here to this curvature tool, or this warp, this is the free transform tool, and, just start playing with it and get creative. So once again, that is just a basic tutorial on how to do a few things that will save you a ton of time, that you can start creating logos in here. You can use a warp tool, you can use a free transform tool, you can use a curvature tool. Once I learned those basics and I got confident in using them, then it was a lot easier to start saying, okay, well now I can add on over here, or now I can add this gradient. But almost anything that you can do in Photoshop with letters and typography and drop shadows and stuff like that, you can actually do a lot of those things in Illustrator as well. And it is an extremely powerful tool. It's very nimble, and I highly recommend, if you're gonna be a graphic designer, or if you're gonna do any type of marketing that you wanna create your own stuff, you just spend a little bit of time learning this amazing tool.